did the research to get enrollment openings at charter schools in Minneapolis, private schools in Minneapolis, as well as starting to understand the open enrollment process to neighboring traditional district schools.
Wake up, wake up. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Another Sunday morning. It's cold here in Minnesota, but wherever you're tuning in, it's Dark Side of Education. I'm your host, Rashad Turner. Appreciate you joining. As usual, we have a lot to talk about. You might have heard this past week, Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, they had this members only meeting. Members only, let me do the air quotes. And a lot of discussion was happening. A lot of discussion about, why they don't want to return to school. You would have thought these folks were doctors, right? That their assessment, as if they have put in the time to really do that work, and they're doctors. And I always tell people this, right? A person could work at McDonald's for 20 years flipping burgers. It does not make them an expert on cows, right? That they're not the cattle experts because they were flipping burgers for 20 years. And another thing, I know I'm no medical expert, right? And there's been a lot of conversations we've had on here about reopening, getting our children back in schools, a lot of discussion around the disinformation that the teachers unions are putting out there. So I thought today it'd be good to bring on a doctor, get some information so we can all feel a little bit more comfortable as we, send our children back to school, right? My daughter's been in a hybrid model. Nobody got sick. No teachers died. Nothing happened, right? They prepared, set things up so it was safe for our children. But, that's only my voice, right? So today, this morning, we're going to kick the show off with Dr. Scott Jensen, medical doctor here in Minnesota. Dr. Jensen, good morning.
Good morning, Rashad, and thank you for having me on.
Hey, appreciate you, sir. I know you're busy, so I'll just say thanks again for being here. I know you're doing a lot to keep our community safe, keep people safe. So thank you for taking some time this morning. What Dr. Jensen, I know a little bit about your background, but why don't you tell the Dark Side of Education viewers a little bit about yourself, and then I have a few questions for you.
I'd be glad to. I'm a middle child of 5 of us. I grew up in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, and that's a small town of about 4,000 people. I went to public school. My brothers and sister all went to public school. We had a great experience. We didn't have any choices in education other than in Sleepy Eye. There was a public school and a private school. I went to the University of Minnesota and I studied dental school. I wasn't happy with teeth, so that was a problem. So I went to the seminary for a year, and then I went back to the University of Minnesota and went to medical school. For the last 4 years, I've been in the Minnesota Senate, and I've been vice chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. I was on the Waconia School Board for 10 years and served as chair for 3 different years in the 1990s, mostly. Wow. I think education is critical, and I think that we need to have the kind of discussions that you're bringing to the forefront. These are hard conversations because there's awkwardness. We don't want to demonize one group over another. We don't want to fracture relationships. What we want to do is build relationships, and we want to have the hard conversation. How do we deal with the problems? And they're significant. So I look forward to our conversation. In terms of getting the kids back to school, I'll just jump right in.
Please do.
I have become sort of a spokesperson, I guess, for COVID-19 elements. I'm not an epidemiologist or a virologist, but I'm a family doc for 40 years, and I've spent time in the trenches, and I treat viral disease virtually every day of my life. So I do have some hands-on in the trenches experience with viral disease. And I also have been a teacher and an associate professor at the medical school for many years, up until my resignation last year. Having said that, I think that if you actually look at the data, I hesitate to use the phrase follow the science, but if you actually look at the data, the chance of a 6-year-old or a 16-year-old getting significant disease from COVID-19 is exceedingly small. They are at far greater risk of other things happening, whether it be accidental death, motor vehicle accidents, or the whole realm of mental health challenges in terms of suicide, anxiety, depression, suicide attempts. One of the things we've not talked about is a quality adjusted life year. We call it QALY, or QALY. What does that mean? Well, if we have someone commit suicide at the age of 15, we've lost them to our society for 65 years. If they were going to live to be 80, 65 years is what we lost. But if I die of COVID, I'm 66. You maybe lost 14 years max. So I think when we start talking about that, we really have to think about the collateral damage of what we're doing with some of our COVID policies.
Yeah. And one of the big things that's been coming up is that, the children could spread this to the adults, but I want to dive into something around mental health, right? I mean, that has been something that over these past few weeks, I even think back to the Senate hearing that we participated in a couple of weeks ago, and hearing the gentleman from, I think, Hazleton was on there. Can you talk about those mental health impacts that our children not being in class, not being in school is having on our children?
I'd be glad to. And I think that it's important to realize that whatever data we have in regards to mental health on the rise, mental health issues on the rise, it's going to be scant, because mental health, when it starts slipping away from us, it's not like appendicitis. It's not easy and clear. And gee, Billy's got stomach pain, so we've got to get him to the emergency room. Mental health oftentimes can be put off. Well, you'll have a better day tomorrow. Get a good night's rest. But the fact of the matter is there's a slow slide downwards, and we're seeing that. I had a pediatrician call me from another state the other night, and in her practice, they have some 10,000 pediatric patients. They've had no deaths from COVID, but they've had almost 10 suicides in that practice alone. So we know it's happening, but it's not going to announce itself. So what we're seeing is see people sort of just live with that hovering cloud of melancholy that comes from COVID. But it's not really COVID that's causing that cloud of melancholy. It's more our policies. It's us telling the kids, we're not going to let you have a normal life. We're not going to let you interact with your friends and smile and laugh. We're not going to let you see facial expressions. We're going to neutralize you. There's an interesting study that was done many years ago called the blank face. You can Google it, blank face. And what it is, it's a mom interacting with a 1-year-old child for about a minute. And the child's cooing and reaching out, and they're having a relationship. And then the mom turns around, blanks out her face, turns back to the child, and gives the child no interaction at all. And the child, it's almost heartbreaking to watch this 6 to 12-month-old child just reaching out, trying to once again reconnect with this adult.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing to our kids, and what we're seeing the disparity in achievement. It's getting worse. I mean, the people that we most should be worried about, the kids that are falling behind, the kids that may not have access to broadband computer connections, they may not have the fanciest iPads. Right. These kids are getting behind, and we're exacerbating one of the most critical problems that we have in Minnesota.
And folks know here in Minnesota, we have worst in nation education gaps. And one of the things early on, I mean, you mentioned it there with broadband, our children across all 87 counties don't have that access that schooling has been, in distance learning. And you talk about that blank face, right? Most of our children are getting 1 hour of teacher time for their learning, right? So I just think about, families ask our family advocates, what's all of this commotion around not reopening our schools? What are your thoughts? I mean, I don't know if you've seen all of the disinformation that's out there, but what are your thoughts? Like, what's a message you have for parents who are in a situation where, we have these teachers unions putting out information, we have school districts putting out information, and by the time it gets to families, it's twice filtered, if you will, right? What's a message you have, Dr. Jensen?
I think parents have got to be the best champions for their kids. When you think of education, I usually think about, there's 5 elements that we have to think about. First and foremost, we have the students, but right there at their side is the parents. Yeah. And the education doesn't happen without teachers. And I think your administration and your school board are generally your facilitators. And then you've got the overarching community. Now, communities are going to, one way or another, spend $10,000 per student to get an education. Rashad, if you're not satisfied with the education your child is receiving, what could you do if we gave you the $10,000?
Right.
You find the best way to educate your child. Because I would tell you that statistics will show that if you one-on-one teach your child 3 hours a day, they will get far more in that 3 hours than they will get in an entire day, potentially in an entire week of distance learning. Right. Now, when we look at that, there's the kernel, I think, of an answer right there. We have somehow got to mobilize you, empower you to have choices. And if we would say, all right, because I don't want to go against the teachers union. They have a certain mission. Their mission is going to be to protect the teachers. And if they say, well, there's aerosolized transmission that could go from the kids to the teacher, the kids may not be sick, but the teachers could get very sick. Well, then heavens to Betsy, let's make sure we get them all vaccinated, but let's give choice. Because if they don't want to be in the classroom and you as a parent saying this education isn't cutting it, then let's give you the $10,000 and let's you form a co-op of parents and do more homeschooling. Let's have you be able to have access to charter schools. Let's have you have access to private schools so you can take that $10,000, go to the private school and say, I got 10 grand right here. Will you give my kid a year of education for this 10 grand? And if I have to do some volunteer hours to help, I will do that. We've got to start thinking out of the box, or we're going to lose kids, and we're losing their dreams. We're absolutely cutting their legs off from under. I can't imagine what it's like to be a 10-year-old kid today.
Right. I mean, I've got a 12-year-old going on 13, and I'll tell you, Dr. Jensen, she loves school. She works hard, but I've seen a difference in her this year. Right. I mean, you know, it's been tough. Right?
It's got to break your heart. It's got to break your heart, Rashad.
And I'll tell you that there's a ton of schools, you know, down here in the Twin Cities where 4 out of 5 kids can't read. Right. So when you talk about that 10,000, and in, you know, Minneapolis, it's higher than that. But, you know, that 10 or 15,000 parents being able to choose. Right. That's something that I think we as a state. Right. We have to start thinking outside of the box. Right now, I think the conversation is stuck on whether we're going to reopen schools or not. Schools are reopening. What is the future of education going to be? And I think you hit it right there, right? Parents having that choice to do what's best for our children. So when we get in these situations, because, you know, that 3 hours of FaceTime at home, you're absolutely right. It's going to do more than distance learning. And whether it's, you know, distance learning or before distance learning for some of our children that are stuck in low performing schools, it's something that we as parents have to think about, right? Last question I want to ask you just on this. Do you think our schools are safe to reopen?
Yes, I do. I think that there's risk in the very gift of life.
Right.
Having said that, I think we should be opening schools. And I think at some point in time, we're going to have to say to the teachers, if you don't want to be there, we'll get people that do. But we have to do that. And I think one of the alternatives is, again, I think we have to empower parents. Parents have been so responsible. I mean, what you're doing right here in this podcast, Rashad, this is exactly what should be happening. But we also have to remember the other side too. It's not just about, if you will, the 3 R's, reading, arithmetic, and writing. It's also about the extracurricular. It's about the interaction. It's how to teach our children to be, if you will, good citizens. And one of the ways they get to do that is they participate in band and choir and basketball and football and gymnastics and soccer and volleyball and golf and track and all these things. We have to let them do that. And the idea of making kids wear masks skating on a hockey rink, I'm not buying it. We say to the wrestlers, you don't have to wear masks. We say to the college basketball players, you don't have to wear masks. But we say to the 14-year-old girl who's running up and down the court, short of breath, spewing and spitting into her mask, keep wearing that mask for the next 60 minutes.
Right.
I'm sorry. I just think some of the decisions we're making are indefensible.
All right. And I think that is, you know, a good place to leave it, Dr. Scott Jensen. Again, thank you for joining us on the dark side of education. I know it's Sunday, you're busy. I hope you have a good rest of the day. And we're going to talk soon. We got to get some stuff done.
Rashad, I would like that. And if there's any way that I can push out to social media this segment that we've had, I'd be glad to, because this conversation is critically important. And I applaud you for taking the initiative and doing this. This matters.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll be sure to send it to you after we're done. I appreciate that. All right. Dr. Scott Jensen, y'all. Like I said, it's one thing to hear me talk about things, but I think it's important to get that medical perspective. Right now, we know our babies are losing in this situation, right? And, you know, Dr. Jensen, he's got that experience, right? It's a professional medical expert opinion, and I hope that it helps folks think about returning back to school, right? So one thing I forgot to ask y'all, and I see these comments are popping, but one thing I forgot to ask y'all, do you got your coffee? Do you got your tea? Because it's about to get cracking. Y'all know Minnesota Parent Union. Y'all know the work we've been doing, the mission that we're on. It is, like I said, one thing to talk about it, but what are we doing about it? So I want to bring on the full Minnesota Parent Union team to talk some education. And when I say like this team right here, y'all, they won't say this themselves, right? But I think it is one of the sharpest teams in Minnesota fighting this fight for education justice. The sacrifices they make, the time they put in to really dive deep with parents and prioritize our children is second to none. I'm very thankful to call these folks my teammates. So I'm gonna bring them on right now, y'all. Minnesota Parent Union. Good morning, y'all. What's up? Wake up, wake up. I got y'all up on a Sunday. How's everybody doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Hey,
How are you?
real good, real good. I got my coffee. Y'all got your coffee or your tea? You got something. There we go. There we go. I got not yelled at, but somebody told me to stop drinking my coffee out of plastic cups. So I got my regular cup here today. It's got cats on it. So Minnesota Parent Union, I know you all, what you're doing, but one of the things that I think is, and of course it's our work, right? Some bias, but you all and we as an organization are super intentional about creating this space, right? Creating this space that is inclusive, is centered around children and families. And this past Friday, a couple of days ago, y'all hosted a town hall with Minneapolis Public Schools Superintendent Ed Graff. And the one thing that I was thinking about the whole time was just how cool it was to have that simultaneous interpretation work, right? We've tried it, but question for Mustafa, Jennifer, Fatun, right? When we think about distance learning, you know, we talk about this all the time on Dark Side. We talk about this in our team meetings, but I don't know that broadly as communities, we think about the experience of our immigrant families, right? Our emergent language learning families. Will one of y'all just sort of kick us off and just talk about why it's important, but also what that experience has been like for our immigrant families that we've been partnering with? Go ahead, Mustafa. You're on mute, Mustafa.
All right, sorry. Yeah. Morning, everybody. It's a good broadcast. It's a good show today. Appreciate it all. What I'm going to start is really, I was listening Dr. Scott, and the one thing that he said really touched me is that when kids like age of 14 or something, if we lose that kid, we lose the society loss about 60 or 40, 50 years, 60 years of of life. Imagine that in an education, that is if you lost the virus. But what lack of education does is far more worse than just death of the disease. Disease, you die, and we're all subject to that. There's no so that's it is what it is. But with the lack of education and special people of color and death to the kids, um, especially is these kids of color that who really already uh, behind in many schools, is that you killed that child. Will lost 64 years of his life, his soul and his entire humanity were robbed and is dead. We have a body standing. If we are not educating a right way a children, you lost that child is a somebody who is there in physically, but when in his soul is totally dead because he can't do nothing in life. We could not educate our children. So I just kind of sort of like think about in a way that it can make a sense. Um, in an immigrant, they already have so many things against their lives. They are the language barrier is there. They come a cultural that is not their culture. Their entire system of education they have been experienced. If they any do, so if any of them will have ever been even in a school, most of them don't have a proper school in refugee camps, and they come in here and they listen what the teacher are saying. We have and they have been we have been programmed in the culture of your parents your first guardians, you listen your parents, teacher is the second parent, and then we trust the education system. So that's why whenever teachers and say that we do right or wrongly, we not analyze, we not think back, we're not thinking, we don't do a lot of investigation because we say that oh the teacher say that we just trust, and that most and often that trust has been lost.
And that's what I was just going to ask you, Mustafa. Do
Yep.
you think that trust has been lost? You,
Definitely that trust has been lost. And here's why my backup, here's why I say that it lost. In necessary, there is still will be some that teachers that are doing a good thing. I'm formal believer that I have a background school, not much, but I taught a little bit, and I have a family history of my dad and my brothers. We have a long come from long family history of educators. But in a system that we're in today and how the education operate, it definitely lost because we see our children not getting proper education. We see our children and families struggling. And it's not coincidence that you don't say like one school or two schools. It's not. Its entire system
yeah.
is neglect. Every day when I talk to the parents, and as a team we talk to the parents, you all know that it's a different when you are sitting in an office and give an opinion and thoughts, and when you are in the community, in the streets and the families, I'm talking to the parents. They are struggling and they lost because they don't see their sense of belonging. They don't see that belong there because there's so many ads against them, and the families are not being treated well and not given the proper information and education they receive. So definitely I will say in confidence, yeah, that is lost, but it can be repaired.
It can be repaired, and in that word belonging, right? I hope folks know that, here at Minnesota Parent Union, it's where they can belong, right? And not have that same experience that they're having inside of that education system. Jennifer, good morning. Can you shed some light on that experience?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good, good. Yeah, I can share a little bit. I live, work, breathe in migrant, immigrant, and refugee communities. I cannot even begin to explain how difficult this situation is, mostly because immigrants don't come to Minnesota for the weather. Right? Immigrants come to Minnesota because of social and economic and political pressures. And the fact that we don't acknowledge that in Minnesota and act upon that accordingly in our education systems and conduct ourselves as adults in these children's lives, immigrant families tend to be highly mobile. It's hard to keep track of them, right? Telephone numbers change, the addresses change. Immigrant families face language barriers, as Mustafa said, although I would say that that is a function of Minnesota focusing so heavily on English only and not supporting multi-language learners across all programming, right? That's a systemic issue.
Right.
Language accessibility is a global perspective taking problem that Minnesota leadership has. It's not a problem for emergent English learners. It is a problem for our state leadership to solve in their own homes, right?
Yeah.
It's because multilingual people are not leading up these task force and work groups and projects that they have at the children's cabinet or in the governor's office or at MDE. I don't blame people who are doing their best to learn the language of the land in terms of the barrier it causes, but I understand and sympathize and do everything I can to help mitigate that damage that is caused. Immigrant families also have huge dreams for their children.
Right.
I am shocked when I have just such low expectations, like, oh, we'll read the same book 7 weeks in a row. We don't think these children want to read a different book. We don't think we can offer them a more challenging option. We don't think we can offer them a book in French and in English and in their home language, right? Like I get so frustrated in observing classes intended for, specific groups of parents, because it is so clear that the bar is so low if you also move in very white spaces, right? Just having the juxtaposition has given me a lot of clarity about where the problem lies, and it is not within the children and definitely not within the families and communities.
Agree. And one of the things I'll point out to folks, right? I mean, I talked about the simultaneous interpretation. We reached out to a company, and I'm getting to that low bar that Jennifer pointed out, right? We reached out to a company to do simultaneous interpretation, and there were still challenges there, right? And it's sort of like, when we think about having access, creating that inclusive space, we have to do things like have interpretation available. We have to do things like, have groups that are multilingual and make people slow down and listen. But thinking of that system, it's like the system isn't set up for that, right? It's designed to do what it's doing. Fatun, can you share, what you've been hearing with families? I mean, you're a mother yourself. What has that experience been like for the families that you're partnering with?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having us here today. Morning. It's heartbreaking seeing families, immigrant families, how the system is not supporting them. It's heartbreaking to the schools and the system is not supporting families. They're not giving them the services that they need. They're not helping those kids achieve their education. And it's heartbreaking for me to work with mothers who cannot read and write, whether it's English or Somali. They can only speak. So when you're sending information in the mails and calling and leaving voice messages that they cannot understand, it's heartbreaking. And the kids are not getting the services that they deserve. So my heart is aching and bleeding because as immigrants, education is very important. Somalia is a country of multiple languages, English, French, Spanish, Italian, Arabic. We all speak it. Our elderly are well-educated people, but when you come to America, you expect better than what you have before, not less, or looked down at, and not get the services that you deserve. Our kids are lacking of education. American system, the way it's set, is for them to give a lecture, and then it's the child or the parent to make sure those kids are being educated and understand the system or the lectures or their materials. As immigrants, like Mustafa said, teachers are second parent. So you expect the schools to make sure your kids do their work, pass their assignments, get their grades up, and all of that. And here, when parents come from refugee camp to America, they have a huge dreams for their kids to be a doctors and lawyers and nurses and all of that. And when the system fails them, it's heartbreaking. I'm a mother of 4, and I see the struggles my kids are going through, even though they're all born here and they're not, struggling to learn English. They're struggling because they don't get the support they need. So the schools and the system needs to change and step up and provide those families for the services that they need. Lack of communication, lack of support. There's not enough support for them.
And thank you, Fatun. And before I bring Kulia and Tony, how do you all, Mustafa, Jennifer, Fatun, just quickly, like, what's a message that you send to the families that you're working with? Because you all have this knowledge, right? You're used to dealing with that system. What's that conversation with the family usually like when it comes to addressing some of the things that you've mentioned? And Jennifer, you can start.
Good question. So normally my conversation with families are just starting with that your child is brilliant and don't let anyone tell you anything otherwise. That your child has all of the potential and we are going to do everything we can to find them the resources that they need. If the school says no, don't accept no for an answer. Keep pushing, keep asking, turn to somebody else, ask Minnesota Parent Union, ask your local teacher to push with you, talk to other parents. You are not alone. You are not alone. You may feel alone, but there are other people out there dealing with exactly the same thing you are. And if your child is struggling with it, another child is struggling with it. Just a quick note, we now have evidence that 60% of Hispanic children in St. Paul are not on track to graduate, right? A couple months back, there was like an article that it was 40% that were off track to graduate. It's now 60%. So I'm wondering, when it gets to 100% of children are not on track to graduate, is that when we do something?
Right.
Those are the kinds of conversations that I have with families.
And that's one thing that, again, a lot of our children get lost in these sort of black and white conversations, if you will, right? But we know that experience, that belief gap, right, it is, pervasive throughout this system, throughout our communities, as far as what these systems think of our children, right? Mustafa or Fatun, anything on that?
For me as a parent, and I see a lot of immigrant families, I tell them, this is another way. We're survivors. We know how to survive. We know how to become pieces. And this is one of them. For them to learn how to advocate for their kids, for them to know how to advocate for themselves and seek resources. And as for our team and Parent Union, we're here to fully support them, guide them, help them, and give them the resources and the services that they need. If we do not have that, we will find a way to get them the help they need. That's what we're here for, to show them, guide them, and hold their hand to speak up for their kids, for themselves, and seek help. So I always encourage them, we're survivors. We can do this. As a team, we're able and capable of achieving and helping our children. And as a mother, as a Muslim woman, as a mother of African American kids, I have to speak up and seek resources and take no for an answer. Whatever I have to do or our team have to do, we'll go through this. We'll get through this and get the help the kids need.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Fatun. And see, I'll let the world know, right? Fatun's probably the quietest of us all, but as you hear, very powerful every time she shares those stories. Mustafa, what's that conversation like? You know, that when you have it with parents about attacking that system, fighting against the status quo.
Um, I'll start with this. For me, it's a personal. Actually, I take everything seriously, especially advocacy of the families, because I shared with you guys before, and before I started this advocacy, when I started Cooley and back in a long while back, I was in a classroom. It's a couple of schools. I will not mention their names, but I see the treatment of these kids are getting in the classroom, and it's not exaggeration. I was there, and then I see how they treat him. One of them I already shared with you the stories. The young boy. Um, I realize I see this, and then if these parents don't understand the system, cannot understand the language and all this, if these children has been treating this way in the classroom, while I am here and seeing in the hallways what is it like for that other schools and when I'm not there, and so so that was my turning point.
Right.
And I tell parents first, I share with my story, personal story, the struggle, all these things that I go through in life, coming to refugee camp to all in Minnesota, and did and achieved some. So I share my own personal story that if I can do it, any child, your son or daughter can do it. Um, you have to understand these immigrant families are really resilient. They are tough.
Oh yeah.
This they come from so many challenges, obstacles, and they made it, and they're thriving. So I encourage them and support 110%. I told them that you matters, like Fatun and Jennifer said, and everybody else will say, you matter, and we give them support they need. I go with the school anywhere they want it. Basically, I got your back. That's what I do. We got your back. Basic end of the story. No matter what, we're gonna support you, and we also teach them how to and challenge the status quo. And then I said, like, as a mom, you're the most resilient, strongest person in the planet. As a mom, women of color, black
Right.
woman, get up, stand up for your child, do what's necessary for you to support your own child, and we got your back. So basically, if the families understand you got their back, because you have to understand one thing: system failed them, educational system, and any system of governance fail these families. So they have no hope coming from that side. So now their hope is us. So when me and our team sit down with them and say, like, what we need for you, what do you want us to do? What they speak up and they invite their homes. They speak, say whatever in their heart, and then we go from there. We support them, and then we say, like Fatun said, we don't take no for an answer. We seek answers, and if we can't get the answers now, we continue. So yeah. So for me, it's just like we got your back. Basically, we tell families that you matter, and you matter. Your children matter. They're smart. They're beautiful. They're intelligent. They can achieve anything in this life if they get the opportunity. So that's all the key is do they get the equal opportunity? If they
Right.
get the equal opportunity and open playing field for all children, I'm confident they will succeed. And so, yeah.
Got a chance. We need a chance, right?
That's it. Absolutely.
And thank y'all for that. I wanted y'all to kick us off because, like I said, folks, we get caught up thinking about our own situation sometimes, and I know we can forget about some of our children, right? So Jennifer, Mustafa, Fatoon, thanks for getting it cracking. Kulia, Tonya, what's up? Good morning. I want to hear.
Morning.
I want to hear from y'all on just attacking that status quo, right? I mean, I'll say this to folks. A couple of weeks ago, we were some of us were testifying at this Senate hearing, right? And I had never heard Tonya say, well, if you don't want to teach our kids, if this isn't for you, well, then you should just retire, right? And I remember I got fired up because one of the things about our team, we have been working together for a little bit, but I think that energy, right? We vibe, and that energy just gets us all fired up. But Tony, I was surprised by that, pleasantly surprised. You feel me?
I feel you. I feel you. It's just that, you know what? It's we expect so much out of families, especially working families, the ones that we call essential workers or the ones that do these day-to-day jobs. They're out there. They've been working this whole entire time. They didn't have a break. Many of them can't quarantine. They don't have the space. They don't have the money to afford to do this or do that. And we're asking them to do so much. But yet we're saying, teachers, you know what, we know this is a difficult, and we know that it's working other places, but here we're not even going to try it. We're not even going to give families that option to send kids back if that's what they need to do, because they're working. There's no childcare. There's no childcare dollars. Y'all didn't think about that when you had all these schools closed down, that if parents were required to go back to work, who was going to watch these kids? If they don't have a different support system, if their family members are also working, who's going to watch these kids that are at home that should not be at home by themselves? And we're all about just, one of the things I love about Minnesota Parent Union is giving families the options, right? To learn, to speak to families, to find out what their needs are, and to teach them to advocate, and just not to take no for an answer, and just say, hey, these are what my needs are, and I'm going to advocate for my family's needs until I get those resources, or I'm not going to shut up. And so that's what we're doing. So we're saying, hey, we have overwhelmingly heard from parents, I need my kid to go back into school. I'm worried about their educational journey. I'm worried about their mental and social status. I'm worried that I'm going to lose my home because I can't go back to work and I have no other resources for childcare. That was my option, was school. And then making sure that these families get what they need. If you're not going to open up schools, then give them the $10,000 and let them go do what they need to do to make sure that their family's taken care of. What we all say that we do in Minnesota nice and everything like that. Take care of our kids, take care of our families that need it the most.
Right. Kulia, what's your thoughts this morning?
I'm pretty much echoing everybody. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same story. It's the same song. It's the same dance. Families are struggling and they're not getting the support they need. We know pre-COVID families wasn't getting the support they need. And so COVID has exacerbated that. And those in the Black community, immigrant community, special education community, those communities are even suffering the most. Childcare, lack of internet support. It's not, that they have the hardware, but the support itself, the access is not there. Fatoon talked about parents not being able to read or write. How do you expect families to support their kids at home as they're doing as they're going through their educational journey? And then the communication, it's not culturally responsive. You hear Fatoon saying the voicemails aren't working and the letters aren't working. So what's the next thing? Hey, I'm going to have somebody that speaks your language. I'm going to be culturally responsive, somebody from your community, to make sure that the information that we're giving out to the school, because it's critical, and it's critical for you to make an informed decision about your family and your child. I'm going to make sure that you have the information in any way that you need it. And I'm going to make sure that you understand that information in any way that you need it. But that's not happening. That is the current state of education. And that's what we're dealing with right now. And we at the Minnesota Parent Union, we have to pick up the pieces that the education system is getting money for. And we have to You have to get up every morning, Rashad, and go find us money to help families. And then people are complaining about where our money is coming from. Where do you expect all these people of color that are trying to help other people of color to get money from?
Right.
So that's the current state. That's where I'm at this morning.
And it's like what I'm hearing from everybody, and I know this, right? But we have to prioritize the voices of families, right? Because if we parents who have been, impacted the most by our worst in nation education gaps, right? If we aren't in the driver's seat making the decisions, we all know here in Minnesota who has been in the driver's seat making those decisions, right? And it's been teachers unions. It's been folks who have, their priority, fiduciary. I'm always going to mess that word up just because I try to practice it so much, but their priority is teachers, right? They have a legal responsibility to teachers, and teachers unions have been driving our education system. One of the things that I want to sort of pivot to are these recordings from the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers members only meeting, right? To give folks a little bit of context, over the past couple of weeks, we at Minnesota Parent Union have been pushing a couple of superintendents to get in front of families, do a better job at communicating information, because there's a lot of disinformation out there. Teachers unions are saying, hey, the buildings aren't ready. They don't have the filtration systems and all of these things to make us as communities think that they're not trying to go back to school in the best interest of our children. What I'm going to pull up here and play for you all are audio recordings. And as you'll see on the screen, we've got a bunch of them, right? We've got a bunch of them. So it doesn't matter what their excuse is today after we play these few. Be, interested in hearing what their excuse is for these comments. But I'm going to play some of these recordings. And I want, audience, I know y'all's getting it cracking in the comments. I always tell you I struggle to be listening to understand people as they're talking and keeping up with those comments. But if you have questions for the Minnesota Parent Union team, drop them in the comments. I'll try to get to them before we get out of here. Good morning again to everybody. Glad y'all's tuning in. So again, what I'm going to pull up here, see if we can get this, are these recordings from, from the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers meeting they had. Got the audio set. Let me make sure I had the audio set, because I want y'all to hear this. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to play these, and, y'all kick back and listen. I'll play a few of them and then just maybe get some reaction from the team and from the audience. Again, Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, recordings from their members only meeting that took place a few days ago.
And our privilege that lets us stay at home to do our job while other people have to go to work, and pointing out how many of us are white women. And while that is true, I do think that there's something to be said about people who, like, in my family, we've had the privilege of watching our son who has asthma have an asthma exacerbation event from a cold that nearly killed him. He was in the ICU for respiratory issues from a cold. And I know asthma is a big problem throughout this whole district. And there's just something that really rubs me the wrong way when I'm being told that it's my privilege that is telling me that this is unsafe for my kids to go back into school, when it is like, what if my child's health? So I know my family is not the only family with asthmatic children, especially in parts of the city where there's been environmental issues that are in neighborhoods that are more BIPOC than white neighborhoods. I know this is an issue. So I don't know, but it just really irritating me to see people attacking us because of just saying we're privileged, it's like we have actual concerns. It's not our privilege that we're asking to keep our families safe. And it's also not, I think, privilege to be wanting to keep the entire community safe. And I think we really need to come up with like some messaging to get around that, because that's a huge thing that's being thrown at us right now. And I don't know. It's really been moving me a lot lately to be being having that thrown at my colleagues and everybody, you know.
I know I'm not on stack, but I just want to say that that's so par the course in this district, is to pick and choose when it's beneficial to their narrative, to their idea, when race is a factor. Because it's not a factor for the kids of color and the families who they're expecting to go back, but it is a factor for her that it's a privilege to stay home. It doesn't make any sense. And it just feels like they keep trying to silence the majority of our workforce because they're white. There's nothing we can do about that. We can encourage more teachers, we can recruit and do more about that. But right now, these are the teachers we have, and we should be treating them professionally and fair. And I just feel so infuriated by that, because there are so many people at my school, teachers, who have not heard back about accommodations and have no clue what February is going to mean for them, their children, and the district's like, oh, well, you're privileged, you're not thinking about all of the other people, and it's just wrong. So I just wanted to say, I hear you.
The privileged on the privilege. I'm gonna play a couple more, and then let's get some reactions here.
Question. So it's from Greta's response. It's saying when what's her face wrote back and said, hey, I'm not coming, or we're not coming tonight. She mentioned something about some letter last May that wasn't responded to. And part 2 was something about something was sent out last week at 3:44 saying they weren't going to come, but yet we called anyway after that meeting. Can somebody speak to that? This made me really confused.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to the letter thing. And the only thing I'm confused about as far as them saying that we were saying school board members were coming over the weekend is that we have a sweet college girl who works for our communications, and she schedules posts for us in advance, and she had scheduled one for Sunday that went out. And I think that's what made them mad. Just FYI, I have hundreds of emails now and always. So them also writing to me at one time and expecting us to then change something, it just doesn't happen that fast. Just like I wrote to them Monday, they didn't respond to me until Friday. So that's just the reality of that. And we did change the title of it today, and I wrote an apology about that. In May, when I secured this position, I wrote to every single school board member, and I would be happy to publish this stuff actually, and said, hey, I would love if you would have standing meetings with me moving forward now that I'm in this position. And Kim Ellison wrote back on behalf of the 6 yes votes to the CDD saying that they will not meet with me, and I need to focus on my relationship with Ed Graff and something about having a positive relationship. There were 0 questions in there. There was nothing that I saw that got a response. It was a very clear no that they would not meet with me. And that same day, Nelson Higgins wrote me text after text, which I also saved, and then would be happy to show them if they're not doing any of this. Telling me that it's because of my behavior around the CD and how dare I try to tell them what's best for kids. And he's doing that as a favor by letting me know that they're not going to meet with me. And basically, how dare I even ask them to? And I was like, my behavior around the CDD. And he showed me one post that one of my childhood friends had written that had some really great, actually, informational links in it regarding the CDD, but also called them charter school board members or something. And I remember very much liking that post because I loved these links he had put in there. I didn't think twice about it, and I shouldn't have to explain myself now or to anyone that I liked a post on Facebook, but that was his reasoning. And he showed me the screenshot of me liking that post that infuriated board members. So please think about this right now, that because my behavior around the CDD, they are punishing 3,500 educators right now by refusing to have meetings with the union president, as you all are the voice of and representing 35,000 students. So if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to share, but that is.
And last one for today.
The autism program is being everybody's gonna have to re-go for their jobs and things like that. And so therefore they're being separated from teachers. Teams are being separated, and just all these things are happening. And the fact that they're not coming to us and they're not, first of all, telling us what's going on. We're getting this information second or third hand, and it's not okay. That's not how we would run a classroom. That's not how a principal would run their school. So why do they get away with something like this? Why is it okay for them not to listen to us? We have the right to be furious. We have the right to be angry. We have the right to get answers to these things that we're not getting the answers to. And it's not okay that we're not. And they need to listen. And I don't know how to make that happen, but I used to think it's great working for NPS. They listen to us. They're awesome. And I don't know, my idea of what the district is like has totally done a full turnaround because of everything that has happened in the last year. The fact that they stopped listening to us at the beginning of March when all this happened. They haven't listened to us from the beginning, and they've done what they wanted. And the only person they're listening to is apparently Governor Walz, who's getting pressure from everybody else in the country as well. And okay, I'm getting off my soapbox now.
Thanks, Kelsey. We're going to move on to the next.
The autism program is being everybody's got.
Off your soapbox. Thank you, Kelsey. Reactions from the team. And as y'all seen, we're not going to release all 20 of those recordings. But when we think about the fact that in Minnesota, the teachers union, starting at Ed Minnesota down to these local branches like Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, have been in complete control of our system. What's your reaction when y'all hear this thing? And I want to start with you, Kulia.
Well, you've got the privilege talking about the privilege, and then you got the CDD, and then you've got, I don't even know what that last talker, but they don't listen to us. I'm not shocked. It's just interesting to hear what they talk about behind closed doors, you know, how they don't understand why everybody's attacking them, how nobody's listening to them now. Yeah, because the district is finally listening to parents. You're not the only one at the table. So now you feel your power being clenched and you don't control the district. And so now you're upset. Now you're throwing a temper tantrum. And that's what we see on display at their private meeting. A temper tantrum. That's what they had at their public meeting. Not one person spoke about children. They spoke about the CDD. And that's what I want to make sure that the audience is clear about. The Minneapolis Federation of Teachers is mad about the comprehensive district design plan, not about school reopenings. Let's just get that clear. They are upset about the comprehensive district design plan, and they are using the school reopening as a way to complain about the CDD. And that was obvious in their private meeting.
Thank you, Cooley. Jennifer, you're a teacher. What's your reaction when you hear some of that stuff there?
Gonna have to echo Kulia here a little bit. I didn't hear much about children. Didn't hear much about families. Didn't hear much about learning. Didn't hear much about education. I heard a lot about process, a lot about like my feelings. And I don't I don't buy that that is the best we can do. And I'm going to also put some space. Yes, families are speaking up more, but it's also true that the district isn't exactly listening to families. So, like, there is a little bit of something there when I ask myself the question, who is the district listening to, or where are you taking your cues from, right? And that's the nature of the system. That's why we're going for systems changes. We're not trying to change individual teachers' hearts and minds to, take a new perspective from your privileged perch where your family has asthma. Yes, I have asthma. Everybody in my family has asthma. Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic youth are more likely to have asthma. Why? Because they live in neighborhoods that are near industrial factories. This is globally, not just Minnesota. Like, it's the lack of perspective on the situation that absolutely grates me the wrong way.
And it's, to hear them bring up asthma, right? And folks in Minneapolis know there was a huge effort to get Northern Metals, a company that was polluting the north side, huge effort to get Northern Metals out of the north side. I never heard MFT or any of these teachers speak up on that effort. So to use asthma, it just, it makes me feel some type of way that they would use our children in that way, but not mention our children in other ways, right? Mustafa, Fatun, Tonya, thoughts?
I'm just speechless how they were just talking about their needs and their pay and their feelings and everything else that they talked about, and how their privilege rights are not met. And it was just disappointing. I was really like, what am I? What am I listening to? What's going on? This is not a country that I wanna raise my kids at. This is not the Minnesota that I know. So it's just a lot of disappointments. That's all I could say as a mother of four. It's very disappointing to see the people who's supposed to be teaching our kids talk like that, advocating for our kids, speak about their feelings and not the need of the families and the not need of the kids and the education and all of that. So I'm very disappointed in that part. But those are the things that we need to hear. So as a parents, we can speak up for ourselves. So we can advocate for ourselves and help our kids achieve, because our kids are our future. They're our doctors, our lawyers, our teachers, this is our future. So we need to do something about that.
Appreciate you. Mustafa, Tonya? And hold on real quick. Kelsey, I see you in the comments. We have plenty of recordings, right? What you're doing right now is exactly what a guilty person does. You're trying to, what do they call that? White-splain. You're trying to white-splain. We heard your words. We heard the words of you and your colleagues, okay? And the people you're chatting with in the comments, they got this. I'm not even gonna, y'all got her. Tonya or Mustafa?
I thought it was interesting, just the whole experience. It was the first time I ever heard a teacher's meeting like that. And I thought it was really weird. We had just held the one for St. Paul, where we invited families on a Zoom call, made sure they got questions answered and asked and things like that. And then we attended this Minneapolis Federation of Teachers, because we do a lot of work in Minneapolis. We need to know what teachers are saying, what they're doing, and things like that. And it was interesting that they didn't allow families to be part of that meeting and then had this private conversation afterwards. And we have to remember the disparities that we face in Minneapolis and Minnesota. That private conversation basically explains where we're at with those, why we have those disparities. It really showed a lot of privilege, especially a lot of white privilege, because most of our teachers are white, young women. And it kind of, the whole conversation about privilege, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And the whole conversation about privilege and them not understanding that they're privileged even to have the conversation about being able to go back to work. It's a privilege that you have to be able to make that decision to work or not work in that environment, because there's families that don't have that privilege. And to not understand that really, to me, explains everything that's wrong with our educational system. They just really kind of laid it out. If I didn't understand it before, hearing their private conversation, I definitely understood it afterwards.
All right. Mustafa.
Actually, I'm gonna echo what I think what everybody else said is what I believe also. But at the I understand the frustration, and they fail, and they see in their faces is actually is frustration. But that frustration is not and when you look at it, it's not actually something that and toward our children struggling. Since they advocate in themselves, which is they have a right to advocate, but they have to remember one thing. Um, as an educator, you have a privilege to educate our children. That's a big responsibility, and your job is to advocate our children. They should be the center of everything that you do. But this conversation, like everybody else said, um, I don't see the children were not the center. And then actually, if you look at the other side, um, public service people, when you have public servant, now we have a pandemic, we have a nursing. Look at this, working the front line, dying, getting sick, not seeing their families and their children and their husbands and their wife. They believe that it's their duty to serve the community and die for it. My sister-in-law is a nurse. She cannot see her 3 years old son every day. She's not gonna see his son, her son, and that is a sacrifice you choose when you go that profession, and they grace their face, and they accept it everything. So now, as a teacher union and teachers complaining this staff because it's not their level of their comfort has not met, is a little bit disheartening. It's a little bit is really sad. I will finally say, um, even though I respect and I support teachers, and I always been somebody who have a soft side for them, and we all do, because they all educate us. We are not against them, but our job is to state the facts. When something is not going the way it's supposed to go, we're gonna say it. That's why Minnesota Parent Union is so unique, is that we say what we believe in, and the children are our center, and we advocate our family. So I will say, when you have that fire on you, I wish you had that same fire when one of your colleagues has the one of the Minnesota. Last week we see that we hear this, one of your and the top and teacher is teacher of color who won the teacher of the state, lost. And then I know when some, you didn't advocate for your own people, and that's a little bit touching me, because I know when you want to fight for something, you go all the way down to get what you need, but you did not even have it and guts to fight with one of your own, save their job because they are person of color. So it's just a little bit disappointed, and then I think but accountability is supposed to be there, and we everybody should be held accountable. Period.
Yeah. And it's we're talking about present day, but the history of the racism within the teachers unions is something that I want to dive into more. And next week I'm going to bring on civil rights activist and humanitarian Christina Laster to dive into that some more. But before we get out of here, and again, thanks to the Minnesota Parent Union team, thanks to everybody tuning in, right? I want to say this before I click end broadcast. When you think about the right to rage, the right to being furious that white woman was talking about in that last recording, think about what that looks like for our families, right? When we want to have that right to rage, that right to be furious, it's we're going to call the police on you for being too loud in here, stating your complaint. When our children have that right to rage and right to be furious because they're bored in class because the teacher's not paying attention to them, our children are suspended, expelled, and lose that learning time. Right? That's what that looks like for our families. What are we going to make it look like for these teachers unions? What are we going to make it look like for our children? Right? It's something we have to think about. We as parents, we have to be in the driver's seat. If we're not, things will continue to be done to us or for us and not with us. Again, thanks to the Minnesota Parent Union team for coming on. We will continue to release more of those recordings, right? We put out a few just to get that reaction, just like we got it from Kelsey. She got more excuses than the dictionary. We'll continue to drop those recordings. We'll see y'all next week, 10 a.m. Again, it's Dark Side of Education. I'm Rashad Turner. Shout out to the Minnesota Parent Union team, Mustafa, Jennifer, Fatoon, Tonya, Kulia. I appreciate y'all. Let's keep getting this done. God's peace and blessings, everyone.